Добрый вечер. К сожалению, я не говорю на...
Good afternoon. I'm very sorry. I don't speak English. I don't speak French either. I'm going to speak in Russian. So please put on your headsets. I'm sure that you will understand me thanks to the interpretation. And for the next 15-20 minutes, I will try to give you interesting information. My name is Lukpan. I live in Kazakhstan. This is my country's flag. Kazakhstan is a country located between Russia and China. Perhaps we can show the next slide. I don't know if there's a... You could give me the clicker? Thank you. Here is our territory. Astana is the capital of the Republic of Kazakhstan. You can see on the top that it looks a little bit like Switzerland to scale. There's a great deal of difference between Switzerland and Kazakhstan for the past 20 years. Kazakhstan is the main supplier of energy, including to Switzerland. I learned that 25% of the oil used in Switzerland comes from my country. This is very symbolic for me. This is a very meaningful moment because everything that I would like to tell you today stems from this important issue, that of oil. Many consider oil to be a natural resource, but I consider it to be a curse. Over the past 20 years, my country has been governed. You see the production sites here. And I was saying that for the past 20 years, my country has been governed by Mr. Nazarbayev, our immortal leader. He calls himself an democratically elected leader, but although he's been in power for 20 years. And for these past 20 years, he has created a political system that perfectly reproduces the totalitarian system that existed during the Soviet era. A one-party parliament, a country where there is no freedom of expression, where there is no guarantee of the fundamental freedoms of its citizens. That means that in 2011, in the west of Kazakhstan, the oil sector workers rose up. The police opened fire on them. 16 people allegedly were killed and 70 wounded. Recent history of Kazakhstan is divided into two parts. Before this uprising, before the 16th of December, 2011, and after. So until the 16th of December, a large number of people, Kazakhstan and elsewhere in the world, people had the illusion that there was hope, that they felt that the country might not be perfectly democratic, but that there might be some stability in the region, allowing Switzerland and other countries to have some guarantees in terms of provision of oil. But since that date, many people have now understood the real price that they would have to pay. For the past 20 years, when the cult of personality was set up for the leader, the real situation in the country is as follows. The profession of journalism has become a very dangerous one. I could give you some figures here. Today, we have 9 TV channels, 20 newspapers, and 12 radios. And that sounds very positive, but don't forget that all of the media belong to the government and are controlled by the government. Between 2011 and 12, the authorities violently attacked the independent press. And over these past 2 years, 4 journalists were sent to prison, 3 accused of calumny. And these are journalists that published critical views of the president. In 2011, more than 150 million people, 150 fines amounting to $5 million were demanded of the journalists. In 2012, 12 attacks were carried out against journalists, yours truly as well. In 2012, when I was returning home, and two young people whom I did not know came up to me and wounded me. They knifed me, and they hit me with their and harmed me with their guns. Now I survived. This is one of the many attacks against journalists, and this led to a debate in the subject in the population about freedom of expression in Kazakhstan since 2011, when Kazakhstan became independent and elected Mr. Nazarbayev. Since 1991, people have not really thought about the issue of human rights or transparency of the public budget or other such issues. All these questions were pushed off because the leader convinced everyone that the country had to be set up, and they would talk about policy later on and freedoms later on. And in December of 2011, with this mass demonstration, things changed. And then there was the attack on my person and other very violent attacks against the press as of 2012. And the most recent stage in this process took place in December 2012 with the Public Ministry of Kazakhstan addressed the Supreme Court, leading it to close the televisions and 8 newspapers and radio stations. And why? Because of the conflict that took place in Zhanaozen. It is said that one of the reasons I was attacked was that our newspaper had spoken of these events very largely. And the image of Kazakhstan, of a stable country supposedly, for supplying oil that the world could lean on, had been tarnished by this publicity. That was the reason for the response, and that was why the government has taken such measures against the press, so that no one sounds like a dissident or challenges what is being done, and that nobody can contest, and so everyone will think that everything is going very well in Kazakhstan. One of the characteristics of the regime is that over the past 10 years in particular, they have been trying to build a democratic facade, a show facade. And that means that it has all the attributes of a rule of law. There's a parliament, there are courts, and there is a press that seems to be fine. We have a law on the leader of the nation forbidding the image of the president to be attacked. It is considered tantamount to terrorist attack. And the attacks against journalists take place because the judiciary actually has no independence. 6 journalists were arrested last year by the police, which had been reporting on the strike. And they were accused of inciting hate and social discord. This is a pure invention by Nazarbayev's regime. Just like the accusation of the femme of Varsilov, who was accused of attacking religious sentiment, as we heard. The regimes use such arguments to turn public opinion against the dissidents. And in Kazakhstan, this wording was used, saying that the journalists were inciting public hatred, and that the stability of the country was being shaken. And I think that Putin uses such imagery as well. In 2012, there were 13 cases of threats against journalists. We have the Gorganevsky case, who for 24 days was imprisoned and was only released after Reporters Without Borders and the European Parliament and the Organization for Cooperation in Europe, all of which demanded his release. And these are the newspapers, the independent papers we have in Kazakhstan, and take a look at the ones that have been closed after this recent purge. We only have one left, Uralskaya Nedelya, which is my newspaper, which still exists. It's the only independent newspaper left. So in the ranking of Reporters Without Borders, you can see how Kazakhstan has gone from 125th. It has gone down to more than the 160th place in terms of press freedom. Our regional press is also being subjected to such pressure in their printed editions. And this is something that takes place every day. There are more than 300 court cases against journalists now. And the 25th of February, Kazakhstan will become a member of the Council of Europe, and this is a great honor and a major coup for the country. But we should understand that this is a great responsibility, because being a member of the Council of Human Rights means that it should rethink its political orientation. Many people in Kazakhstan see that its status in the Human Rights Council of the United Nations, something that is rather unsettling. Until 2010, Kazakhstan presided over the OECD for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and at the time there was a great deal of hope. It was thought that this would allow Nazarbayev to take democratic measures. That was the illusion. Thanks to this honor, he would undertake reforms. But in reality, what happened was exactly the opposite. That is, in 2010, when Kazakhstan presided over OECD, there were the demonstrations that were brutally put down, and all the newspapers were then shut down, as we've said. And Astana today has become a caricature of what we see in the film The Dictator. We're not that far from that image. It's not that wrong. Kazakhstan has a number of fears about its status at the UN Human Rights Council. It is feared that Mr. Nazarbayev and his government will take this as a pretext in some way to undertake phony reforms. He uses gains made in foreign affairs, and in 2010 all the TV channels showed the presidency of the OECD as international recognition of the regime. And although there may have been criticism about Kazakhstan about human rights, I now fear that this status as a member of the Human Rights Council will help the country to justify itself. I would call your attention, that of the international community, to the fact that in all dictatorships, the population hopes that there will be help coming from the international community. It is hoped that people will make statements, that there will be sanctions adopted, and that measures will be taken to force the dictator to become a bit more democratic. And that is why I'm launching this appeal to all those who will attend the Human Rights Council next week in the Palais des Nations, not to forget that after each liter of oil, of gas, that you will be pumping into your car, there's a price to pay. That there are people in prison, that people have been assassinated, people whose rights have been flouted, and you must understand that that gas has a price to pay, and it's a very heavy price to pay for each and every one of us. We would be very grateful if in Europe, when new agreements are entered into, that you could understand that there is always a price that must be paid, and that the price is often paid in a very tragic way. Thank you.